Over the past year, 33 out of 52 countries in the IMF's Global House Price Index have shown increases in home prices, even when the economies in those countries are slowing down. So are we on the verge of another global housing bubble? For his views, we're joined by Amir Korangy, publisher and founder of The Real Deal. Amir, good to have you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
So the IMF...
You sound like you have all the answers already. I don't know if you need me here.
I'm sure you'll provide us with additional perspective. The IMF saying that we're on the verge of a global housing crisis, that it threatens economic stability, and that governments should start to think about stepping in. What do you think?
Well, I think that any global organization, including the IMF, whenever they intervene in markets that are locally driven, like real estate, I think they're not valid. I don't think that those markets are affected by what the IMF has to say.
But you don't think that these housing bubbles that we could be on the verge of will create economic instability? We saw that here in the US after 2008.
I feel like there's been measures put into place that will prevent that, hopefully. That remains to be seen. Right now, things seem to be going really well. There are hot markets, there are heated markets like San Francisco, London, Hong Kong, New York, Miami, and these markets are definitely heated, but they have strong economic fundamentals that are driving it. But you know, if the
which global housing markets do you think are currently at the highest risk of reaching their peak and therefore then having their bust?
That's really hard to say because again, the fundamentals are there for a lot of these cities. For New York, they're there. For London, they're there. For San Francisco, I feel like if the tech sector was to go bust, I feel like you'll see a huge crash in the San Francisco real estate market, but that really relies on the tech sector.
Well, the IMF says that the reason we've got these high prices, and we had Christian allude to that in his report, is because we've got central banks keeping interest rates so low. Is it time to raise interest rates? And what impact will that have, not only on the housing market globally, but also on GDP?
Look, I think it's good to monitor it, but I don't believe that they should raise interest rates. Housing has been a huge booster for the entire economy all over the world, especially in the major markets here in the US and in Europe. So to do that right now would be sort of premature, and I think there's other measures that could be taken. I do believe
What measures, for example?
What measures can be taken? I feel like the banks, there's a systemic threat with institutional investors in overextending themselves, and I feel like there should be some measures into monitoring them.
Okay.
But you know, as far as raising interest rates, if anything, they should make lending a bit easier for people, because I know it's for the top 50%, top 30%, it's been easy. For the ultra-rich, it's easy to borrow money. But the people in the bottom 50% are definitely not experiencing it.
And it's a very valid point you raise, because home ownership is at an all-time low. In the middle class, it's harder to buy homes in cities like you mentioned.
Because lending is so hard.
Because lending is so hard, but at the same time, interest rates are low, and we've got these exorbitant housing prices.
Banks cannot take the chances that they took in the 2000, you know, in the early 2000, the odd years. But so now that they do have the money and that they are well capitalized, especially in the U.S., they're only really lending to the people who can afford to pay them back. They're taking very little risk.
Now, here is a controversial point. Part of the boom in housing has been fueled by foreign investors with money coming into other countries. The IMF is recommending that governments do something to prevent foreign investors or slow down their participation in housing markets. What could be done? What do you think of that
suggestion? First of all, I don't know how the IMF would plan to enforce a measure like that.
Well, that a government could make visas more restrictive, that you could, for example...
If anything, they're making it easier. And it would be detrimental to cities like London, Miami, New York, where so much of, a big chunk of their business is coming from foreign investors. Because as there is instability around the world grows, money wants to come to safe places. And where are those places? The US, England, Europe, well, some parts of Europe. But that's where that money wants to go. And for the IMF to put any sort of a measure to prevent that, I think it's irresponsible.
So are we going to just sit by, watch these housing prices climb, and then be surprised when it goes boom all over again?
Look, the whole thing with cycles is that you know, they repeat themselves, and there's no way to get around it.
So we can't learn the lessons from the previous one?
We try to learn our lessons, but you know, cycles go back to the Bible. You know, 7 years of feast, 7 years of famine, And they keep repeating themselves. If you look at the last 100 years, every 15, 20 years, we're going through a housing cycle. And the only way to protect yourself is to remove yourself from the equation and not be in the market.
Well, that does not always seem like such a feasible option if you need
Right.
a roof over your head. All right, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you, Amir Korangy, publisher and founder of The Real Deal. And still to come.